Let's give it up for Yara Allen. You may be seated on the stage. We got some real serious work to do tonight, but we always sing as we challenge injustice. And so we're going to have a welcome, and these are timed out because we're live streaming around the country, literally around the world. So wave at everybody. Because we're not going to let this happen in the dark. And so I want to ask everybody to maintain their time. We've got about an hour and a half for our audience on live stream. We're going to have a short welcome by Pastor Paul Wilson, our brother, Union Grove Missionary Baptist Church. And then we got some buzz on this mic. Then we're gonna have an interfaith litany by Andrew Taylor, our indigenous voices, the Reverend Kevin Chandler, and then Queen Zahika Shabazz, and then Swami Niyananda, I think that's right. All right. And then the Reverend Weston Matthews. All of these persons were chosen by people here. And we're doing a litany. I want to try to get this hum out, please. And then we're going to have a video and then a time of testimony. When Sister Floyd comes to intro the persons that are going to give the science and the legal, we want the intros to be very short so we can go to the facts, right? This is not about any one or two people. This is about the whole community, right? And so we want to start in that way. I'm trying to, Brother Mike, man, you got a lot of hum in this. I know you can hear me, but it's still a hum. And we didn't pay for it to be like that. I like to get what I paid for. Just old-fashioned country. Can you get that hum out? I was born at night, but I wasn't born last night. You know when things are right and when they're wrong, all right? So let's get this started.
Just before I give the welcome, I've been asked to thank everybody who has worked so hard to make all of this possible. I've had to write mine out tonight, so y'all know I usually don't use written manuscript. This indeed is a historical moment for the Union Hill and Union Grove community in Buckingham County, Virginia. So we welcome the Reverend William Barber, President of Repair to the Breach, co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, and National Call for Moral Review, and former Vice President of the United States of America, Mr. Al Gore. The founder and chairman of the Climate Reality Project, a non-profit devoted to solving the climate crisis. Tonight, we're grateful that these justice and climate leaders have accepted our invitation to be with us. Tonight, you'll hear by Mr. Gore and the Reverend Barber, King of Buckingham County, Virginia. The timing is impeccable and not by happenstance to come to a Black History Month in the place where Carter G. Woodson, the father of the Black History Movement, was born of former slave parents. Carter G. Woodson stood for the truth. And so tonight, my friends, you will hear the truth from experts in environmental justice, experts about crack gas, experts about legal issues related to the proposed Atlantic Coast Pipeline and compressor station that is proposed for the Union Hill, Union Grove community. You will hear the truth that dominion and corporations do not want you to hear and talk about. So may you be moved by the personal testimonies that shall be presented. May you be recommitted tonight and uplifted by the interfaith litany shared tonight. We live in an era where many people deny the effects of climate change and fail to recognize their ethical, social, and moral responsibilities, especially when a dollar can be made of corporate profits and hands. Our air and water is under threat. Pollution is rampant. Our wildlife is in peril, Our land is destroyed and ownership faces the possibility of eminent domain. Our health is at risk and our way of life is compromised. The poor, the aged, the young, and the marginalized people are left with the promise of a short-term financial gain, but in reality, are left with the long-term consequences of the true economic cost and its impact. So the social, moral, and ethical concerns are presumably offset by the strategies of investors and big business, with promises of stronger local, state, and regional economies. So maybe tonight you come simply to be in their presence, or maybe if you come from a moral and ethical background, to be educated to the truths that we stand together in a moment of strong reckoning. So we must stop the polluting of our planet and stop the injustice towards those with less political power and voice. So tonight, I take the pleasure and the honor to present to you those who've come to help turn an upside world, right side up, that humankind reigns over the profit line. The truth, the truth, the truth.
To be free from bondage, for the hungry to be fed, for all to have clean air to breathe and clean water to drink, for the sick to be healed, for the beloved community to come on earth. We lift our voices and call out for environmental justice and quality health care for all.
We know that pollution and climate change negatively affect people's health and quality of life.
We hear all our sacred texts. Allah is in the water, God is in the dry land, Allah is in the heart, God is in the forest, Allah is in the mountain, God is in the cave. Thou art in the tree, thou art in its leaves, thou art in the earth, thou art in the firmament.
We hear the call of our sacred texts. Let all beings be engaged in one another's well-being. Let all weakness, sickness, and faults be diminished and vanished. Let everyone, everywhere, be blissful and at peace. No more shall sound the weeping neither in it, or the cry of distress. No more shall there be in it any
When the people we elect prioritize private, corporate, and financial interests over our precious natural resources, we must speak out.
We have fundamental rights to clean water, air, a healthy environment, and public resources to reverse the polluting impact of extractive and fossil fuel industries. Do not have unleaded water to drink. We must speak out. Stop poisoning our children. Stop poisoning our water. When our politicians enact legislation that denies sickness from Mother Earth and allow big corporations to devastate everything's land and ruin our community, we must speak out.
When those same elected politicians deny the connection between ecological justice and justice for the poor, we must speak out.
And it wasn't just white people, but tell them that it wasn't just native folk, but that we were all here together in one feud. And while I see the folk up in the top, but as a black man, I want you to put that sign down a minute. I'm a black man, so I can say this. And I want us, what folk to see, is I want everybody to stand. Because see, I know how the media, some will focus on one thing. I want everybody to stand for a second. And put that, we see, because this is how to defeat us in division. Now I want everybody to grab a hand. Let's put all the, let them see us tonight, not a sign, let them see us. And put those hands up. And now say, look at us. Not a sign, but look at us. Because we are the sign that change is coming to Union Hill and change is coming to America. Give yourselves a hand tonight.
Community testimonies tonight. I'm an anthropologist and I'm in the tradition of Zora Neale Hurston. Our experts are the community members who tell us about their stories. But it's very important that we get across the information that people need, the facts, to counteract the misinformation. So first we'll be hearing from Karen Camplin, who's testifying on the history and culture of everything. And she's the Environment and Climate Justice Chair for the Virginia State Conference at the NAACP. Next will be Mary Finley Brooke. Dr. Brooke is testifying on the science of frack gas. She's an associate professor in the Department of Geography and the Environment at the University of Richmond. David Neal is testifying on the ways that our laws and policy protections are not being enforced. He's a senior attorney with the Southern Environmental Law Center in Chapel Hill. And following their testimonies later in the program, there are going to be 3 testifiers from the community who will be telling you their first-person testimonies. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I just want to say bluntly that I completely disagree with the historic and cultural assessment that was submitted by Dominion as part of their environmental impact. It is absolutely untrue that this area does not exhibit a cohesive cultural landscape. Union Hill is far from that. Within its boundaries, Union Hill is filled with abundant, rich history, its natural beauty, its calmness, and most importantly, the amazing people. Maybe they thought there wasn't any cultural or historic or heritage here because the Buckingham County courthouse was burnt down in 1869, and with it were the records of all the slaves that were within this area. But Union Hill is far from that. The African American culture and history is far from who is recorded on those slave ledgers. We're far from that, and we're more than that. So the culture and the heritage of Union Hill wasn't destroyed that night in the fire. And we know that because we know of the struggle of the people who founded Union Hill. the determination to make sure that this community was built, something that they could pass on from generation to generation. And we know they prided themselves with property ownership, and they knew this was something that they could give to their generation, the wealth and the equity that was tied to these lands. We know all of those things. We also know that they prided themselves on building the community as they established the 2 churches here. To me, the environmental and racial injustices plaguing Union Hill is more than the environmental devastation that's going to come with it if the pipeline, which it's not, is going to be constructed. Or the constant emissions from the compressor station that we know is going to give off emissions constantly. That's not going to be built either. But what is the injustices going on in Union Hill? It includes the environmental racism and the continual efforts to erase and devalue African American and people of color. This marks an opportunity for us, for Governor Northam, our elected officials, and our regulating agency to take a pause and confront the truth of what is happening here today and make every effort to right the wrongs so all communities can begin to heal. This is a time to respect and make note of all the trials, struggles, and determinations of the founders of Union Hill. Located on the property purchased by Dominion from the Variety Shades Plantation, we know there are some burial sites. This is the time that we need to restore those burial sites and avoid what Dominion is doing. They're ignoring and devaluing the American heritage. This is not the time to ignore the past. This is the time to confront the harsh realities of the segregation practices that were used to demoralize the slaves by not allowing their loved ones to be buried in cemeteries with whites. And they were given to the far reaches of whatever plantation site it was to be left and ignored and forgotten. Let this be the time that Union Hill ancestors are properly identified, honored, and provided the care and dignity that was denied to them in life. Let this be the time we learn who they are, we learn their names, and we complete the fabric of Union Hill's history and culture. This is the time to take a stand with Union Hill. This is the time to say no pipelines, no compressor stations, no to fossil fuels and natural gas projects. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Mary Finleybrook from the University of Richmond, and I served this past year on the Governor's Advisory Council of Environmental Justice. Our council exposed disproportionate risk to African American communities and low-income neighborhoods from dangerous new gas infrastructure. We pressed for emergency intervention to protect Union Hill. Subsequently, Governor Northam disbanded our Environmental Justice Council. And then he created a new one. These aren't advancing. Can somebody advance for me? A new council that could only evaluate predetermined topics established under executive order in an attempt to limit public discussion of civil rights crisis caused by gas expansion. Advance again, please. Historic Union Hill is the wrong place to build a compressor station, but there are additional problems. New gas pipelines take the world quickly forward towards a tipping point. We must act today to avoid climate instability with high financial costs and social upheaval. Advance. Political leaders ignore the scientific, we have no advance. The scientific evidence of methane, one of the most potent greenhouse gases. Since natural gas is predominantly made up of methane, there are climate-forcing leaks as we extract, transport, and use gas. In spite of planetary limits and proven harm from methane pollution, do you know methane is not regulated? And do you know why? Because of the lobbying power of the oil and gas industry in the selfish, short-sighted, and dishonest actions of politicians. Conventional energy production causes excessive land, water, and air pollution. Gas, as we extract today, is not natural because fracking uses hundreds of toxic chemicals that end up in our groundwater and our drinking water. There is air pollution throughout gas production, including exposures in many homes from gas leaks. But the most concentrated toxicity occurs around compressor stations. Nearby residents are exposed to annual emissions measured in tons of hazardous air pollutants such as benzene, formaldehyde, and arsenic. These pollutants are labeled hazardous because they've been documented to harm human health. In a rural county without reliable cell phone service and with limited internet service, Buckingham residents might not receive advance notice of scheduled blowdowns, which is when the most toxic air plumes occur. They can't then choose to leave the vicinity to protect their health. Now, Union Hill is populated, and in spite of false and erroneous claims, reducing the population by 600% in the air permit application. So there's daily safety risks. These are from fires, explosions, particularly for these proximate families, due to the highly pressurized gas equipment and the flammable contents. Yet residents were ignored when they requested cumulative risk assessment and comprehensive health studies. Now, I must draw your attention to the fact that there are some who benefit from Buckingham's devastation. There are corporate executives and investors who line their pockets through expansion of gas projects. Meanwhile, captive ratepayers like myself, under utility provider Dominion Energy, have to pay for the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, a project nearly $3 billion over budget. So my energy sector research demonstrates pathways to produce energy that is good for the economy, good for the people, and good for the planet, like Yogaville's solar array in Buckingham. Many of the people on this stage work to support a shift to renewable energy in Union Hill. My students and I are collaborating with farmers like the Lowrys and landowners like the Harpers to create local jobs while producing healthy, sustainable energy for community benefit. Join us. We are all Union Hill. What happens in this historic rural community demonstrates the moral fabric of our society. As a scholar and an educator, I stand with Union Hill, and I proudly stand with all of you who do too. Thank you.
We have to see it as a link in the larger chain of the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. The largest and most powerful energy companies in our region have used their combined strength to push forward the 604-mile pipeline, one that would ship gas from West Virginia to Virginia and North Carolina to generate electricity. The actual price tag, we don't know. Originally it was estimated to cost around $4.5 billion, with a B. Now it's forecast to cost upwards of $7.8 billion. Now before that kind of money can be spent, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC, is supposed to determine whether it's in the public interest. Now, it failed to do that here. Instead, FERC looked no further than the contracts to purchase gas offered up by the ACP. And here, it's important to stop and understand the structure of this deal. The ACP is owned by utility holding companies, primarily Duke Energy and Dominion. And the parties that have the contracts for that gas, they're affiliated public utilities of those same energy companies. Now, FERC decided that those self-dealing contracts were an adequate sign that there's a public necessity here. Yes. And because of FERC's allowance for a 15% rate of return, it's the shareholders of Dominion and Duke that are going to make big profits from this deal. But who pays? You, me, anybody who is a ratepayer of Dominion or Duke Energy. These monopoly utilities will seek to recover their costs plus their profit, plus that rate of return. Now, too many of our neighbors already cannot afford essential electric service, and they cannot afford the additional expense of the Atlantic Coast Pipeline.
Now, who's going to pay for the pollution? We just heard a little bit about. Now, most directly, the people of Union Hill. The company's decision to put its polluting compressor station in the predominantly African-American Union Hill furthers a shameful legacy of concentrating environmental harms in communities of color, and we can't stand for it anymore. We all pay for the increased carbon pollution from the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. Under its most recent report, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change found that global net carbon pollution must fall 45% from 2010 levels by 2030 and reach net zero by the middle of the century. And there's no way we can achieve that if we keep building fossil fuel projects like the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. We cannot afford to scar our landscapes, muddy our streams and rivers, or fragment our forests for this unnecessary pipeline. FERC abdicated its responsibility to ensure that all required environmental permits were vetted before rushing forward with its approval. FERC's premature approval is allowed them to take private land and cut down trees, even while essential permits are under judicial review. Communities like Union Hill, landowners, and all of us are in harm's way. 7 federal permits have been stayed or vacated, suspended by federal courts or by the issuing agencies themselves. As a result, I'm happy to report that construction of the entire pipeline is halted indefinitely. We cannot afford this risky, expensive, and unnecessary pipeline. Thank you.
Guide our feet. Guide our feet, Lord. Guide our feet. You see us down here. We're fighting for justice, and we need you to guide our feet. We stand as one, Lord. We stand as one. We stand as one, Lord. We stand as one. And we're down here fighting for justice. And we need you, Lord. We need you to walk with us.
My name is John W. And I grew up in the Union Hill community. In 1963, I left Buckingham County for the military, where I joined the Air Force. And after 40 years, I returned to Buckingham County. And I relocated to the property where I live now. I have a ranch. I raise cattle. And the reason I returned is because we have the full season that we can celebrate. The clean air, the clean water, the quietness, and so much greenery, which I was used to. And I really like this community, and I like the county of Buckingham. I want to quote what the great Martin Luther King Jr. said, as it pertains to the struggle we are in. A man dies when he refused to stand up for what is right. A man dies when he refused to stand up for justice. And a man dies when he refused to take a stand for that which is true. I'm here today speaking in this place at this event to stand for those same values for my community, to protect my community and its history from a toxic, polluting compressor station which will change our lives forever. The people here matter. The history of our community matter. Creation matter. Union Hill was settled by freedmen, one of whom was my ancestor. And the history should not be erased for a permit for a toxic compressor station. I have great concerns for our water, what is going to happen when underground pipe leak. We won't be able to drink this contaminated water. What about our gardens? What about our livestock, domestic animals, and wildlife? They all need water, our most precious commodity. I'm concerned about the toxic air that we will have to breathe. These poisonous and unsafe gases will pollute this most precious air that we breathe. I'm concerned about the effects of noise, of performance, stress, behavior of animals. Noise will have on our cows, especially newborn calves, and on our donkey. It has been proven that cattle animals hear high efficiency sound much better than humans. Can you imagine the stress it'll have on cattle on a continual basis? Can you imagine the trauma this noise will cause when the mother cow is trying to give birth? We live in an agriculture area where we raise crops, cattle, dairy cows, donkey, goats, and chicken. And we are stewards of God's earth. And we are to take care of it, not to pollute it. Yes.
Bishop, I have another S word for you.
All right.
Sacrifice.
Oh, wow.
Because that's the way that the communities along the pipeline are being treated, like a sacrifice zone. And rural communities are experiencing the quick take and the eminent domain. For most of us, our property is the most valuable asset we have in terms of dollars. But Dominion says we don't need to use our property for our purposes. The laws that we have will give landowners a little money one time, but they won't allow the landowner to fairly negotiate for anything else. Not rewriting through your own property, not safety, not protecting heritage, nothing. My family has operated our farm business at Mount Rush for 117 years. Let's see if we can switch this. The key buildings including the slate-roofed home, original ice house, granary, smokehouse, and barns have been there since 1804, 100 years before we got them. I grew up knowing that it would be my responsibility to help manage it and pass it on to the next generation in as good or better condition than I received it. However, the Atlantic Coast Pipeline puts all of this in the middle of the incineration zone. The company insists on crossing the middle of the fields we use most, refusing to rewrite on our property along existing fences where we would always be sure where it was. The company could avoid breaking up our fields, the daily operations, and move the path within our property, putting us on the edge instead of the middle of the incineration zone. We'll have to move cattle across that huge ditch every time we need to work them. We'll be permanently limited in our use of that land because we will have to protect the pipeline right-of-way. The pipeline will rip across the terraces my grandfather created to improve water retention of the land 50 years ago, instead of crossing the edge of the field where it would not affect the terraces. If something goes wrong, the resulting fire can't be put out. It has to burn out. And this pipe is much bigger and under much heavier pressure than the ones that have been around here for 50 years. And the safety records for the newer pipelines are not good. If something goes wrong, we could lose everything, including our lives. You might have seen the signs on Route 60 showing the pipeline crossing. Many in Buckingham are along the incineration or blast zones if the pipeline crosses through their neighbor's land. And they may not even know of their increased danger because no one's required to tell them. Rural areas get the lowest safety and the least oversight. Congress has never funded the safety adequately and actually has directed that there be more focus on populated areas because that's where the company would lose the most if something happened. But we as individuals get less safety, thinner pipe, cut-off valves 20 miles apart, less inspections, the whole 9 yards. My husband and I plan to retire at Mount Rush, and my husband is already managing the business. Our current home in Montgomery County looks out on this, the Mountain Valley Pipeline, which is already under construction. The resulting destruction is even worse than we expected. Last fall, roads were repeatedly covered with 4 inches of mud. In December, I watched Mountain Valley put in a pipe on the top of Fort Lewis Mountain, back-to-back 16-hour days with one crew working rain, snow, and fog. The experience makes me worry about the ACP and what they'll do during construction and how our Buckingham land will be changed forever. Pipeline easements permanently put the rights to our land, the company's rights ahead of ours. Our current eminent domain laws allow them to take your land easily with no consideration of your use of your property. They tell you you won't know it's there, but you must always put it first. Your life depends on it.
Hurting my family and I'm not going to allow it to continue. Somebody is hurting my family, and I'm not going to allow it to continue. I will not be silent no more. My name is Richard Walker. I'm the founder and CEO of a 501c3 nonprofit organization called Bridging the Gap in Virginia. In that capacity, I work with the injustices of the justice system. I work with the formerly and currently incarcerated convicted felons and how the systemic racism has made it so that these individuals are spending 75% of their lives in prisons. That this systemic racism to help individual rural areas such as Buckingham to have an economy, they went and had prisons built throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. I'm at this point with all the bills. I'm at the General Assembly every year, every session. And every bill that has anything to do with the injustices of the justice system, they get killed, stuck in subcommittee, never make it out of committee in order for it to be sent to the floor. Systemic structured racism in the Commonwealth of Virginia has to stop. Reverend Barbara, I want to get rid of this lady who's keeping the time. It is reflected not only in the environmental racism, it's reflected in the justice system, it's reflected in mental health, it's reflected in education, it's reflected in the school to prison pipeline, it's reflected in every facet of the Commonwealth of people in Virginia, primarily people of color, and it must stop. All right. Union Hill, as a small child, you can hear my accent. I'm not from the South. I was born in New Jersey, but every summer from the ages of 5 years old to 13 years old, I spent my summers in Union Hill, in Buckingham. I am fifth generation of my great-great-grandfather, Taylor Harper, who was a former slave, freed in 1865 with the Emancipation Proclamation, purchased his land for $15 that Dominion thinks they're going to come on and take an easement through eminent domain for their own greed. It ain't happening. As I said, I'm fifth generation. Sanaya, Giselle, what generation are you? Stand up. Yeah. To deny them their inheritance. Then I have two additional brothers and one sick. One is a fourth generation, sixth generation, and seventh generation Harvard right there. This proposed compressor station. Somebody is trying to hurt my family, and I'm not going to allow it. I am ever so grateful for all these folk that have came to the defense of Union Hill to stop Dominion. A staunch environmentalist. Sam Rasool, Lee Williams, Barry Beckman. I am about renewable energies for Buckingham. Today, one of my good friends, newly acquired friends, Reverend Woodbury, was here with us all day. And he walked our property. And he gave me a schematic for how my cousin's houses that are right next to each other on Union Hill Road, how we can take one posting and create solar paneling on each of their houses where we ain't got to pay the million no more. Before it's said and done, I'm going to learn how to install solar paneling. Listen, I'm around the corner from here once a month at Buckingham Correctional Facility. I work and speak, and I'm a motivated speaker because I am a formerly convicted felon. I need to tell you that first. You know, and since being released from prison, I have been working toward getting rid of these systemic racial laws that affect people of color that ended up in those prisons. I will be able to teach those men in Dillwyn and Buckingham how to install solar paneling so when they come out of prison, they got a job. They got a certified skill that they can go and get a decent paid job. I ain't seen no stop signs, so I'm getting ready to go. But listen, come Labor Day, every summer, every year Labor Day, before I was born, my family would have a family reunion in Buckingham on the Harper land. And everybody from Union Hill would come by. This year, we haven't had it in 4 years. This year, we will be having our family reunion. And everybody